In this video, we are going to be solving one-step multiplication and division equations. So our essential questions are, what is the multiplication and division property of equality, and how do you use multiplication and division properties of equality to solve equations? So we're going to be doing similar to what we did in the last video where we were solving addition and subtraction equations, except now we're going to be undoing two different operations, multiplication and division. So the multiplication and division properties of equality are very similar to the addition and subtraction properties of equality. So this video should be somewhat of a review. If you multiply or divide the both sides of an equation by the same thing, it will still be equal, just like with addition and subtraction. So a couple of examples here. 3 times 4 is equal to 12. Hopefully we can all agree on that. So what I did was I just chose to multiply both sides of this equation by the same thing, and I just chose 2 because that's easy to multiply by. So 3 times 4 times 2 is 24, and 12 times 2 is 24. You can see that after I multiply both sides of this equation by the same number, I still get a true statement. I still get something that is equal, and that is the multiplication property of equality. If you multiply both sides of an equation by the same thing, it will still be equal. And then likewise with division, 3 times 4 equals 12. I started with the same thing, and here I divided both sides by 2, just because it's easy to divide by 2. And 3 times 4 divided by 2 is 6, and 12 divided by 2 is 6. So again, you can see if I divide both sides of an equation by the same thing, I'm still going to have a true statement. I'm still going to have a true equation. So how do we use multiplication and division properties of equality to solve equations? Well, we're going to use them to undo any multiplication or division happening to the variable. We're going to do the opposite of what's happening to the variable, because just like with addition and subtraction, they will kind of cancel each other out, and then we'll have just the variable so we can solve our equation. So an example here, 3 times x equals 15. Well, 3 times what is 15? Again, you could probably do this mentally, but I want to show you how using the division property of equality will get us the correct answer, even if we didn't know how to do it mentally. So since x is being multiplied by 3, I want to undo that. So I use the opposite operation, and the opposite of multiplication is division. So it's being multiplied by 3. I'm going to divide by 3. So 3 times x divided by 3, this times 3 and this divided by 3 cancel each other out, and all I'm left with is just x. And then what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I divide this side by 3 as well. And 15 divided by 3 is 5. And that is my solution. X equals 5. And if I check that, I put x or 5 in for x. 3 times 5 is 15. 15 equals 15. And that checks out. And then here is a division equation. Y divided by 7 equals 13. So what divided by 7 equals 13? This one might not be as immediate mental math for you. So to solve this, we're going to undo this division. Y is being divided by 7. So I want to reverse that. I want to undo that. So I'm going to use the opposite operation. So the opposite of dividing by 7 would be multiply by 7. So I multiply both sides of the equation by 7, and then these two essentially cancel each other out. Dividing something by 7, then multiplying it by 7, you're just left with what you started with. And so we're left with just y. And 13 times 7 is 91. So y must equal 91. And if I check that, 91 divided by 7 is 13. 13 equals 13, and that checks out. So that's how we're going to use the multiplication and division properties of equality to solve equations. We're going to use the opposite operations to undo them. So let's solve some equations here. So again, the first thing I want to do is kind of divide my equation into its two parts, its two halves, and then I'm looking for the side that has the variable. And this side is 6 times n. 6 times n equals 42. So what times 6 equals 42? You probably know that from mental math, but I'm going to solve this using the division property, because division undoes, that's not even a word, undoes multiplication. So I'm going to take 6n and I'm going to divide it by 6. And that should be equal to 42 divided by 6. So I'm going to divide both sides of this equation by 6, and 6 times n divided by 6 is just n. Those two operations undo each other. And 42 divided by 6 is 7. So there's my solution, n equals 7. And again, I'm going to do a quick check here. Plug 7 in to my original equation. 6 times 7 is 42. That checks out. So that's how we can solve equations rather quickly. H divided by 5 equals -8. So again, I'm going to divide my equation into its two parts. Here I'm looking at the variable. H is being divided by 5, so I want to undo that. So the opposite of dividing by 5 would be to multiply by 5. So I'm going to take this side of the equation and multiply it by 5. That means I have to take this side of the equation and multiply it by 5. So h divided by 5 times 5, these two operations undo each other. So these will essentially cancel each other out, and I have h equals negative 40. And there's my solution. And then if I do a quick check, h is negative 40. Negative 40 divided by 5 equals negative 8. Negative 40 divided by 5 is negative 8, so negative 8 is equal to negative 8, and that checks out, and we've solved that. So this comes in handy for these equations that we might not know mentally very quickly. Here again, I have negative 100 divided by negative 100 equals negative 20 times x. So again, I'm looking at the side with the variable. X is being multiplied by negative 20. So the opposite of multiplying by negative 20 is dividing by negative 20. So I'm going to divide both sides of this equation by negative 20. And on the left-hand side, negative 100 divided by negative 20, negative divided by negative is a positive. That's going to be positive 5. And then these two essentially will cancel each other out. Multiplying by negative 20 and dividing by negative 20 are opposites. They will undo each other. We call those inverse operations. They undo each other. So now my solution is 5 equals x. And a quick check. Negative 20 times 5 is negative 100. That all checks out, and I know I got the right solution. Next one, 8 equals j divided by 14. Again, if I divide my equation into its two parts, and I'm looking at the side that has the variable, j is being divided by 14. So the opposite of dividing by 14 is multiplying by 14. So I'm going to multiply both sides of my equation by 14. And on the left-hand side, 8 times 14 is 112. And then these two will cancel each other out, and I'm left with just j. J is equal to 112. And again, if I do a quick check, 112 divided by 14, 112 divided by 14 is 8. 8 equals 8. I know I got the right solution. So it always is helpful just to do that quick check. And again, notice I'm writing every step down like I did with my addition and subtraction equations. Okay, it's very important to get into that habit of writing down your thinking and writing down your steps so you can see where you were going wrong if you got this wrong. You have to write these equations down because we're going to get more and more complex equations. You got to get into that habit of writing these down. A couple more. 17m equals negative 68. So again, divide my equation into its two parts. 17 times m equals negative 68. This is multiplication, so I want to undo that. So the opposite of multiplying by 17 is dividing by 17. So I'm going to divide both sides of this equation by 17 to solve it. 17 times m divided by 17, these cancel each other out, and all I'm left with is 1m. Negative 68 divided by 17 is negative 4. M equals negative 4 is my solution. And again, a quick check just to see if my solution makes sense. 17 times negative 4 is negative 68. So that does check out. Negative 68 equals negative 68. Just take the extra second to check your solution. That way you know you've got them right. And then lastly, t divided by 12 equals 19. What divided by 12 equals 19? Well, the opposite of dividing by 12 is multiplying by 12. So I'm going to multiply both sides of my equation by 12 to undo that division. T divided by 12 times 12 is just t. And 19 times 12 is 228. And there is my solution. T equals 228. And again, as always, a quick check. 228 divided by 12 equals 19. 228 divided by 12 is 19. So 19 is still equal to 19. That checks out. My solution is correct. So solving one-step multiplication and division equations using the opposite operation to undo what's happening to our variable.